You described President Tinubu as a criminal. Was that a political opinion, rhetorical language, or a factual allegation? If it's the latter, are you going to present evidence in court?
It's a statement of fact, and I want to draw your attention to what the NDLA Act states. That's the National Drug Law.
Please be
No, we're not talking about my case now. You asked me a question.
Yeah.
And that it says that if anybody has been involved in drug dealing, drug trafficking, there's no statute of limitation. The NDLA can still try you, even if you are president when your presidency is over. We can make that point. And in this case, it's not just that. There were cases during NSAS. There was a case that was active at the Lagos State High Court of embezzlement of billions of taxes that were supposed to be paid by Alphabet as linked to this president. He never handled that case. So they told us after NSAS that the documents were burnt in the courtroom so that they can cover up. That we have several of these. So what I told them is that, why don't you just calm down? Let's prove this case in court. But when we were at the point of proving the case the most, our attorney was ripping apart their one single witness, a DSS guy who said he found out that I made the statement. The judge got upset. He said, stop. If you don't stop, come and kneel down here. It's never happened before. Trying to ask my lead attorney, Marshal Abubakar, to kneel down before the judge because they didn't want us to present our evidence. And ever since then, it has been, let's arrest Sowore, or they charge me afresh with something new, or they harass me. This has been what they did. Don't forget that when this case started, and you said, don't discuss the case too much, I was charged with Facebook and Twitter. They went behind my back and pleaded with Facebook and Twitter not to leave the case, and they settled out of that and left me alone in the case because they know that we can subpoena documents from these people to show the evidence of their own interference with the activities of these companies to make sure that free speech does not exist in Nigeria. Yes.
Do you believe Nigeria today is becoming less democratic than it was 5 or 10 years ago, or are today's institutions simply reinforce or enforcing laws that previous governments chose to ignore?
No, Nigeria had a transition to civil rule. It never had become a democratic nation. That is one reality, and it's a hard fact that we must all accept. The fact that we accepted in 1999 that the military should leave, abandon us with a constitution that we knew nothing about how it was written, printed, or processed, and asking people to run for election and some people to oversee the election did not mean that we had democratic rule. That is why I have restated time and time again that what we had was a monocratic rule. Morons hijacked the democratic process in this country. That's why in 2026, after 36 years of driving the military out of power, I am still being dragged around by goons carrying gun at the Federal High Court, abducted, held at the basement of the Federal High Court, and with the intention of harming me if I resisted. I'm talking about the DSS. This was what they were doing to us in the university. And we're saying, if you had democracy, there will be rule of law, there will be popular participation. We will have a country where elections are free, fair, and transparent. We will have a country where people can believe that democracy will deliver to them a freshness of life. You don't have that. You don't have democracy. Those are basic tenets of democracy. Government 101 in secondary school. So if you don't have that, nobody should deceive you that you have democracy. And that is why I stand, and our movement members stand, and several other people in this country stand up to tell these guys who are running the country that you are not running the democratic system. Don't pretend that you're running the democratic system. And if you want us to have democracy, we will have democracy. But for Nigerians, you're not going to have democracy you want without confronting the guys who hate democracy. And that is what I see the Tinubu regime and these other guys who are operating your democratic structure as. They hate the idea of democracy. They hate the idea of openness. They hate elections. And they hate the fact that you are striving to get a better country because they don't want that. They want you to live in a country where you are perpetually frying something, whether it's akara, kuli, or whatever they call it.
What about the fact that the way, because you talk about democracy,
yes,
and you talk about using the democracy the right way.
Yes.
I mean, what about, you've often dismissed the mainstream opposition as different faces of the same establishment, basically.
That's correct.
Yet many Nigerians believe that defeating an incumbent requires broad coalitions within that democratic sort of space. Are you prepared to compromise with politicians that you've long criticized as a way of getting yourself into office and then starting to change things from within rather than without?
There are people in this country, Nigeria, who have had a chance to go the other way. And I've described the compromises that these people made in Nigeria, assuming they were genuine, as going to the graveyard of human conscience. I could not, in good conscience, wake up one day and compromise with a politician who engaged in genocide that I know of, covered, and had condemned in the past, when we have not punished them for the genocide they committed. I cannot wake up in this country and join the political party of a guy who stole all the money that could have trained children to become graduates and become successful in life, or the people who took money that were meant for roads, in which you and I have lost private relative, whether distance or close. I can't sit down with them when they have not changed their ways, and I know they're not going to change their ways. So I look at the people of Nigeria, and that is what I call the coalition of the oppressed. And so let's celebrate our liberation by fighting these other people. So it's not as if we have not thought about it before. But I know that we're dealing with very hardened, criminally minded people, and they have done it consistently from time to time. They were governors, they stole. They were ministers, they destroyed the country. They were agency, they led agencies, ruined it. And if you meet them, they're not even remorseful. All they tell you is that, let's come join us. You're just taking life too hard. Let's go destroy the country. Why did I do all these years of activism for? If all I want to do is to go and join the coalition of people who destroyed Nigeria.
Well, look,
and the people, let me state that before you come in, who have often made these allusions that maybe you should soften a little bit. They themselves have joined coalitions, and now ended up without coalitions because even amongst them, they can't tolerate their type of coalition building that
let me say
to
this,
the country.
Because we're fast running out of time. We've got about a couple of minutes left. I mean, you've experienced arrests, detention, trials, repeated confrontations with successive governments.
Torture, yes.
Governments from different political parties, but whoever is in government. I mean, and you were telling me just at the outset the horrors of Nigerian prisons, and yet you still, you're prepared to go in there. Has there ever been a moment when you thought perhaps, the struggle isn't worth the personal cost? I mean, you have family, you have, all kinds of... Isn't there another way to fight this battle?
Well, I mean,
for example, you didn't have to call the president a criminal and risk being prosecuted.
Yes,
I mean, you could have used less strident language.
Let me see. Just society doesn't have a basis for victimization, right? There are people who got killed in this country who never called anybody any name, right? And all of them are victims of...
Yeah, but we're talking about you. Your own case. You called somebody something.
Yes, I didn't call a person a criminal in 1992 when I got expelled from the university. I didn't call somebody a criminal in 1996 when they seized my NYSC certificate and put me in a dungeon. I didn't call anybody a criminal. I just said, look, we want this country to be run the right way. Obafemi Awolowo probably didn't call anybody a criminal. Several other people, Ganifa with me, you might say that, his head, we're all from Ondo State. What I'm trying to tell you is that if you have a penchant for justice, social justice, political justice, economic justice, that's all you need to offend the system. And as long as you're not compromised and you're not compromising and you're not willing to compromise, that's all you need to offend the system your entire life. So it doesn't matter. But in our own case, we have to take the hard route because it is necessary. Don't forget, even though we're discussing democracy here, my own attitude towards democracy is a revolutionary democracy where the people step out all at once and change the system because the system must fall. There's no way the system can sustain your development, your progress, your prosperity. The system is here to devour you, and you have a duty to take down the system. That's the revolution that I preach. And that requires that we use the appropriate language, adjective, adverb, and noun to describe people who are destroying the country. Whether they are the ones there now or the ones that are coming, because we need a country that belongs to us, and we don't have to mince words about it.
Omoyele Sowore, I want to thank you very much indeed. And I have to say that I'm glad that you're sitting here rather than sitting in a nick somewhere. It's much better to have you sitting here and sharing your ideas.
You never know what goes on in there.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I'd much rather not know.
But I consider it a privilege that I can go sit there just for doing what is right.
Right. Well, Omoyele Sowore is an activist, publisher, and presidential candidate of the African Action Congress. Thank you very much indeed for obliging us and coming in tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.